We are standing by to take you live to Alice Springs. That's where the Prime Minister is today with some of his senior ministers and senior Labor people in the Northern Territory. They're about to hold a media conference there. We are going to hear from a number of officials. We think the Northern Territory Chief Minister is there as well. Let's listen in.
Thank you to the Arana people whose land we are standing on today. It's great to have the Prime Minister again in Alice Springs for the 13th time. I keep counting how many times the Prime Minister has come into Alice Springs. The Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, Leah Finocchiaro, Ebony and Dawn from Congress, but my important colleague from the member for Solomon from Darwin. So it is fantastic to have the Prime Minister here and the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. They'll make some announcements, but it's great to be standing and looking at this building which we've watched. And the first time I came here with the Prime Minister, we stood on a concrete slab. So to see this building take shape and know that this is going to contribute to the health and the well-being of Central Australia, not just Alice Springs, but the whole of Central Australia, is fantastic. And it is an investment that this government, particularly the federal government, has been quite proactive. So without further ado, I will hand over to the Chief Minister.
Thanks very much, Marion, and it is wonderful to be here in beautiful Alice Springs with the Prime Minister making a significant announcement for the Territory. We've been working really hard together to make sure that we secure a good deal for Territorians, and this week alone we've been able to work with our federal counterparts and the Albanese government to secure one of the best health funding deals we've ever had for the Territory, with a 30% increase in the next 12 months funding, which puts us in line with the ACT, which is well and truly overdue. But of course, the remote Aboriginal investment funding of just shy of $843 million over 6 years. It's really important for Territorians to understand what this means for them on the ground, and particularly for Aboriginal Territorians as we continue to invest in the bush. A big portion of this $843 million is around police investment in remote communities, which supports all Territorians to live in a safer environment. We know that community safety is the #1 priority of Territorians, no matter where they live. But this funding will go further than remote policing, which is critical. It will also support better health outcomes for Aboriginal people living in the bush, greater empowerment and decision making, and of course making sure that our remote communities are invested in. This is a significant point in time for the Territory. We welcome the funding. It's been great to work with the federal government, and of course we've got APON here represented and Congress as well. But we welcome the funding. It shows a good, strong working relationship between both governments. And as we continue to work together to deliver the 7 points that I've been working with the federal government on, we're really hopeful to secure more of that going forward. Of course, the Prime Minister came on board extremely quickly to secure CASA exemptions for our police here in Alice Springs. And we've been working with Marion and Malandiri and Amanda Rishworth to work through some of the Centrelink changes we'd like to see made. We've stood up a working group between the Territory officials and federal officials, and certainly the Territory will do the heavy lifting around making sure we expand referral pathways to the Commonwealth for greater income management of people who are neglecting their children, and particularly failing to send their children to school. So we look forward to working with the federal government to further secure those 7 points. We've had a commitment in principle from the federal coalition, but we continue to work in good faith, and today's announcement is a significant investment by the federal government in the Territory around health and of course a remote Aboriginal investment. I'll now pass on to the Prime Minister, who will explain more about this fantastic outcome for all Territorians.
Well, thanks very much, Leah, and it was terrific to have a good meeting with you this morning, discussing the interests of the Northern Territory and working together to improve the lives of Territorians. I want to acknowledge my federal colleagues here, Marion Scrimgeour and Luke Gosling, who are here. Also John Patterson from APON, who'll say some words as well. This is a great day for the Territory, and it's particularly a great day for remote communities. On my first of 3 visits to Alice Springs as Prime Minister, we knew that a whole bunch of community-based organisations were going to have their funding drop off a cliff on June 30 of that year. There wasn't ongoing funding. There wasn't that certainty. So you can't keep staff and build up that social capital that you need if you don't have that certainty. And that is why this 6-year agreement is so important going forward. Empowering Indigenous communities, providing additional funding for police services, for health, for education, for community and family services where people live, and empowering those local communities to work with government to deliver real solutions. I came here when it was just a slab on the ground, and to see the work that Congress have done here that will give them as well the stability and certainty going forward is so important. This is a tripartite agreement that we've signed today. The funding coming from the Commonwealth, $842 million, is the largest investment in remote communities that we have seen for this service delivery. Over 6 years to deliver services all about building Australia's future and making sure that people in remote communities and First Nations people are not left behind. And we want to work constructively with the Chief Minister and the NT government, but also with organisations like the Aboriginal Peak Organisations Northern Territory, who'll speak just after me. Australians want to close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And we know that we're frankly not doing well enough. And no governments have done well enough, which is why so many of the indices that will be released next week simply aren't up to scratch. So this is about doing better. This funding will deliver essential services for remote communities, including policing, women's safety, children's health, education and alcohol harm reduction. It will increase funding for Aboriginal interpreter services and deliver new funding for community development. It will strengthen support for Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and enable the transition of services from government to community-controlled over time. It will establish service hubs that deliver programs and services designed and delivered in community by community. And it will include up to 8 community development hubs, training and business hubs to support communities to access employment opportunities. This will work with our remote jobs plan, replacing the payment for doing nothing plan with actual real jobs, paying real wages, delivering real training. That will make such a substantial difference. That was a centrepiece of my speech at Gama last year. It will deliver 12 children and family centres. This is about making sure that every child enjoys the safety that every child should have as an inherent right. This is about backing up families and providing the funding to do so. It does mean that more than 570 local NT remote jobs are secured to deliver these programs, making such an enormous difference. And I'll just comment on a couple of other issues as well that are related. Firstly, I met with the Chief Minister on Christmas Eve. Yes. As you do, we spent Christmas Eve and Christmas Day together at the commemorations that occurred for Cyclone Tracy. And that was an opportunity to go through the issues. With regard to Centrelink payments on alcohol-free days, payment days are spread out, of course, but alcohol restrictions, of course, are a decision for the NT government, but we've backed in those decisions, including one of my visits to Alice Springs here, one of the 3 visits I've made, 13 visits here to the Territory. We are rolling out the new remote jobs program with real jobs, and that's important regarding work and training programs. On performance audit, on federally funded programs, we want to make sure that every single dollar from the Commonwealth goes to making a difference to people's lives. We have a range of audit processes in place. If things aren't working, we'll change them. We'll intervene to make sure that the dollars go to where they are anticipated, which is improving the lives of Territorians. So we have high expectations of organisations that deliver taxpayer-funded programs. On royalties issues, the NT government is of course having discussions directly with the Central Land Council. We've delivered the police drones are in operation here. We changed the CASA regulations, and that is making a difference, and the police certainly indicate that that's the case. In the discussion I had with Leah this morning, she was really welcoming, and we went through some of the examples of what that's happening. Regarding income management issues, we certainly accept the NT government referrals for parents who neglect children to income management, and Minister Rishworth has made that very clear. The NT government can refer adults to income management if there are any child protection concerns, and Leah and I spoke this morning about some of the regulations and changes that need to come from the Northern Territory in order to achieve those objectives. These are all important initiatives. We'll continue to work constructively. There shouldn't be any politics in this. This is about making a difference to people's lives. I know that that's Marion's approach, that's Luke's approach, and I know that that's the approach that the Chief Minister has as well. We want governments working seamlessly together to deliver outcomes. And speaking of which, I'll conclude with the $1.7 billion announcement that we made this week, just a couple of days ago now. It's been a big week. We completed the agreement just before WA went into caretaker. There had to be bilateral agreements with each of the states and territories to extend hospitals funding, and we increased it by $1.7 billion. The big winner of any state and territory in that announcement was the Northern Territory, because they had fallen behind. They did need the additional funding that we're injecting. Northern Territory has gone from $430 million in this current financial year up to $560 million, a 30% increase in public hospital funding here in the Territory, in recognition that the Northern Territory deserves its fair share. We'll continue to work on all of those issues to deliver better outcomes for Territorians. But it's a proud day as Prime Minister. We have the Closing the Gap speeches will take place in our National Parliament on Monday. I wanted to make sure, though, that we were here on the ground, the Commonwealth Government, with the NT Government, with Indigenous services here in the Northern Territory to make a difference. And on that note, I will call upon John to speak on behalf of Indigenous organisations here in the Northern Territory.
Thanks, Prime Minister, and let me thank the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister for coming today and signing this significant agreement that's going to have a huge impact and difference for Aboriginal communities and our constituents here today. Today was significant. As I said, the investment is welcomed by the Aboriginal peak organisations in Northern Territory. What this agreement demonstrates is that when the partners, along with the Aboriginal leadership, get around the table to negotiate under those frameworks of the Closing the Gap National Agreement, we can achieve the outcome that we're all aspiring and wanting, particularly for our constituents, the most vulnerable here in the Northern Territory, particularly in those remote locations. So we'll continue to work, and I'm sure the Chief Minister and Prime Minister will ensure that we get down to the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts, so to speak, to look at strategies and implementations about how we go about in achieving those outcomes that we've prioritised in the agreement and get a better, hopefully, outcome for our communities. I'll leave it at that.